hypothesis that I took into the period of data collection centered around what are called innovative moments. These are important events in therapy when the client says or does something that would not have been predicted by their dominant problem-saturated narrative. These innovative moments are the signs of a new alternative self-narrative, or indeed the emergence of a new I position. So if you check out the work of Ribeiro and Gonçalves over the last decade, they produce some really interesting research on this. The emergent thesis centered upon a core idea, that cognitive maps, where my clients discovered these and where they shaped their behaviors, were the platforms on which they realized therapeutic change. In the following slides, I'll go on to explain very briefly the good outcomes each client experienced. But the functions of these maps are orientation and navigation. In other words, where we are now and how we get to our destination. Invoking the thesis beneath a thesis, beneath the formal theory development and myself as theory developer and pattern discerner, I was able to present personally meaningful motifs of navigation along roads, rivers, and in flight, symbolizing directionality and the role of therapist as fellow traveler. Tuesday, 6th of September, 2016. A dream. I was wearing an eye patch that was made from one of the baby car seats. I was trying to cross the street and the road was busy, and with no depth perception I could have got easily hit. I thought how sad it would be for me to die without seeing my children grow up. At the other side of the road was a van, and there were two people in there that I knew from earlier in my life. I can't remember who. I climbed in the back with them and assured them that I interchanged the patch between eyes so as not to damage my sight. However, when I removed the patch from my left eye, I became anxious as I'd forgotten to change it. My vision was blurred, useless, and I was frightened it would never return. I note the timing of the dream. Just before I began my PhD study, I did everything I could to secure the scholarship. It ate into all my free time. I had become myopic in my vision to become a provider. Not only that, but I'm in danger of getting flattened trying to cross the road. Later, during my PhD study, I have struggled to maintain a foot in two worlds. One part of my project, inspired by the scientific approaches of change process research, and the experiential subjectivist world occupied by constructivists like my own supervisor, John Lees. John warned me that if I tried to keep a foot in both worlds, I would be in danger of falling down the middle. My first supervisor, Jane, on the other hand, suggested there may be some valuable insight to be had falling down the hole. Notwithstanding some anxieties on my part about falling into such a hole, I held that if I could maintain this binocular vision, my project would be the richer for it. So to introduce my participant clients and the work we did together. Lou was a woman in her early 30s who was the first to sign up to the project in November 2017. Her initial presenting symptoms were of debilitating panic attacks, including vomiting, which she would experience in situations where she would try to assert herself, and waves of physical exhaustion, which were so bad she had to go on sick leave. The image I used here is of entanglement, which reflected Lou's experience. Lou came to identify her historical role within the family as that of peacemaker. Family conflicts were so frightening to her that on some level it was though people's lives might be in danger. So she came to keep the peace and typically get caught in the crossfire. During our time together, Lou discovered an alternative eye position, which she described as fire in my belly. This became the cognitive map through which she became increasingly competent at asserting herself. By having fire in her belly, Lou came to redress power imbalances in her marriage and in other family relationships. She came to understand that she had a choice. She didn't always have to follow others' agendas, and that people weren't going to die if she asserted herself. Michael began therapy, a man in his 40s, having been born and lived all his life with cerebral palsy. So in no way could his condition be described as psychosomatic. However, at this stage in his life, he was becoming increasingly self-conscious about these symptoms, spasms and tremors in his arms and upper body, to the extent that the more self-conscious he felt, the more exaggerated and amplified the spasms became. In the early stages of our work together, Michael described a strategy that had been working for him all of his life, but which was beginning to fail. He called it keeping my head down. My reverie in the moment was of an Ellis Lowry painting as shown here, with the workers with their bent backs hurriedly getting to where they needed to be. In the Lowry painting, the people are all moving en masse, as though to the chimes of a factory clock, and yet there's no interaction between them. They each face down in their private thoughts. What Michael and I developed together was a hierarchy of exposure in which he would deliberately choose when and how to allow others to see his cerebral palsy symptoms. This was a radically different strategy to the one he'd always employed. Michael took my ideas about dialogical change, which were always implicit in my modelling, and generated his own devices, one of which he described as the two shoulders, like the voices of conscience, and the inner being, which was a compassionate paternal voice, like the way you might talk to a child. Michael's new eye position he described as standing taller. His new cognitive map was built around openness to other people, and his worldview changed from one of aggression and harsh criticism to a kinder, more compassionate world. Jennifer's chronic fatigue had associated symptoms including nausea, and these were associated and aggravated by social anxiety, which was the reason that Jennifer came for counselling. In our early stages, she described an anxiety she had about not being seen, and invoked the theme that she described as the hand in the bucket of the water, which may be located in a poem by Saxon N. White Kessinger. Take a bucket and fill it with water. Put your hand in it up to the wrist. Pull it out, and the hole that's remaining is a measure of how you will be missed. While Kessinger's intention in the poem is to remind us of the importance of humility when we feel driven by our egos, for Jennifer the possibility of being dispensable was troubling. She felt she always had to say yes, always had to be the centre of activities. For the moment she withdrew, it was like she was never there. However, as we mused on the allegory together, Jennifer realised she had some capacity to shift between perspectives. She came to embrace the idea of being able to enter into and slip out of social interactions without needing to be recognised or credited, and she found this tremendously liberating. She took on my own ideas about metacognition, thinking about thinking, which again were only modelled by me, and she made them her own. For example, where she declared that my thoughts are my personal belongings. Finally, Myrtle, who was living with fibromyalgia, came for counselling after a GP suggested that ectopic heartbeat she was experiencing might be associated with anxiety. She even arrived for the assessment appointment with an ECG monitor attached. In our first session together, Myrtle and I explored guilt she had always felt in a relationship with her now elderly mum. Mum had suffered from postnatal depression following Myrtle's birth and did not go on to have other children. As Myrtle talks about the impacts of this guilt upon core relationships in her life, she suddenly found herself in floods of tears. This had been completely unexpected, as though my witnessing had opened something up for her. I located this event within the literature as a crystallization of discontent, and it was the most profound moment of our 5 sessions together. Myrtle came to associate her ectopic heartbeats with anxiety about visiting her mum, and the frequency and severity of these fell to almost nothing during our time together. However, she also came to clarity about her fibromyalgia. She rejected established wisdom about the importance of listening to one's body when one has a chronic condition, but instead considered pain a price worth paying to pursue the things she loved, including dancing, as reflected in this quote. Thus, Myrtle had located directionality in her cognitive map, a transcendent sense of meaning and purpose that helped her to relate to her condition differently.